Jonathan Harrow was a man who had always known love. From the time he could remember, his parents had showered him with affection. He was the firstborn son in a family of five, and as he grew older, the adoration from his parents never wavered. But the same love that gave him warmth also sowed seeds of envy and resentment in his siblings. Growing up, Jonathan had always been the shining star. His siblings, three brothers and one sister, felt as though they lived in the shadow of his excellence. Jonathan wasn't perfect, far from it. He was an ambitious man, driven by the desire to make something of himself. Yet it wasn't his success that caught their parents' attention, but his gentle spirit, his kindness, in the quiet way he loved. It was a love that radiated through his actions, toward his wife, Emily, their two children, and everyone around him. But with that love came jealousy. As the years passed, the Harrow family's wealth grew. Jonathan's parents, John and Miriam Harrow, had amassed a fortune, a sprawling estate, multiple businesses, and lands that stretched beyond the horizon. However, Jonathan's siblings believed, deep down, that their older brother was receiving far more than he deserved. Their hearts twisted with resentment every time they witnessed the affection their parents showed him. He was their father's right hand, the one to whom John would always turn when he needed advice. He was Miriam's confidant, her pillar of support. The seeds of jealousy took root. The siblings, once united by blood, began to fracture. Every time Jonathan received praise or his parents offered him something special, the siblings' resentment grew. Emily, Jonathan's wife, often noticed the tension at family gatherings, the awkward silences, and the cold glances exchanged behind Jonathan's back. Still, she believed it was nothing more than petty sibling rivalry, but the rivalry wasn't petty, it was poisonous. One cold autumn night, everything changed. The family gathered at the estate for dinner, a tradition they had upheld for years. Jonathan had been unusually quiet that evening, sensing the storm that was brewing among his siblings. But he never imagined that it would come to this. As the night wore on, Jonathan excused himself to take a walk in the garden. His brothers, Richard, George, and Thomas, followed him silently. No confrontation at first, no words exchanged. Jonathan felt the weight of their stares before he heard the crunch of footsteps behind him. When he turned, it was too late. Before he could utter a word, Richard's hands were around his neck, squeezing, choking the life out of him. George and Thomas stood back, silent but complicit. The betrayal was swift, too swift for Jonathan to understand. They had planned it all along. His success, his status in the family, his very existence had become too much for them to bear. The whispers of envy turned into the roar of rage, and in that moment, Jonathan Harrow's life was taken. His siblings stood over his lifeless body, the weight of what they had done settling heavily upon them. But it was too late for regret. The news of Jonathan's death spread like wildfire, and the grief that swept through Emily and their children was unimaginable. Jonathan's death was ruled an accident, an unfortunate fall in the garden. But those who truly knew the family understood the truth. The siblings had made sure that no one could suspect them, covering their tracks with lies and falsehoods. Jonathan's wife, Emily, was left to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. She tried to keep strong for their children, but each day became a battle. The true horror, however, came after the funeral. When the will was read, it was a cruel blow. Jonathan had been the heir, the one designated to inherit the family's wealth. But in the end, it wasn't his name that appeared on the papers. It was his siblings. The estate, the businesses, everything that was once meant for his children and his wife was stripped from them. Richard, George, and Thomas had manipulated the system, using their newfound power to ensure that Emily and the children were left with nothing. They took it all: the estate, the bank accounts, the shares. The heart of Jonathan's legacy was reduced to mere numbers on a piece of paper. Emily was forced to watch as the life she and Jonathan had built together was consumed by greed. Her children, once bright and full of hope, now faced a future in poverty. But it wasn't just the money that hurt. It was the loss of Jonathan, his gentle touch, his warm smile, the man who had been everything to her. Years passed and the siblings grew wealthy, their father's empire thriving under their rule. But there was no joy in their success. They had taken everything from Jonathan: his love, his future, and his children's inheritance. Yet they could never escape the truth of what they had done. The mansion they now inhabited was cold, a hollow shell of what it had once been. Jonathan's laughter no longer echoed through its halls, and Emily's absence was felt like a gaping wound in the family. His siblings, though surrounded by riches, were haunted by the ghost of their brother's memory. They had killed him, not with a weapon, but with jealousy, hatred, and greed. In the silence of their grand estate, they realized that no amount of wealth could fill the emptiness left by the man they had destroyed. But it was too late. In the end, Jonathan Harrow had died, but his story lived on. His children, though robbed of their inheritance, carried his spirit in their hearts. They grew up strong, knowing the truth of their father's love, even though the world had taken everything from them. And so Jonathan's legacy was not in the wealth he had left behind, but in the quiet resilience of the family he had built. The man who had been killed by envy lived on in the hearts of those who truly loved him. And that was something his siblings could never take away.